Namaskaram. Namaskaram and good morning here in DFW. For and on behalf of IFAA, we welcome viewers in today's program, Virtual Vibes. This is one of IFAA's signature program and viewed by many and highly appreciated. Today, we are going to bring our first Virtual Vibes program of 2021, and this is also our 5th episode. And we are excited to bring the topic, Exploring Ragas in Carnatic and Hindustani Music, with our talented team that you all see on screen, Kumari Janani Ramesh, Kumari Samhita Kumar, and Chiranjeevi Prajan Divakar. They will take us through an interesting journey and demonstrations about the topic, Ragas in Carnatic and Hindustani Music, and we are excited to listen to them and looking forward to the program. We also request all viewers and subscribe to our YouTube channel and like us on Facebook. Without further delay, over to the team for today's Virtual Vibes program, Exploring Ragas in Carnatic and Hindustani. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Ramesh Uncle, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all the viewers tuning in. We're really excited today to have this open panel discussion on a really fascinating topic. It's essentially exploring the parallels between Carnatic and Hindustani music in the context of the rag or ragam. So before we get started, I just wanted to thank the IFAA and all the support and this opportunity for us to get together and have this open discussion. I've had the pleasure of working with Janani and Samhita over the last couple of weeks. We've been talking about how we want to explore this topic, and what we settled on is just an open discussion where we share our findings, similarities, differences, and we'll go from there. But before we actually get into the topic itself, I just want to do a quick round of introductions. My name is Prajan Divakar. I'm a violinist. I'm trained in Western and Eastern classical music, Carnatic and Hindustani forms. And I've been playing violin for the last 15 years. And currently, just a little background about me, I'm actually an engineer by training. So I finished my graduate program and I've been working for the last year at a biotechnology company. So I'll turn it over to Samhita and Janani to introduce themselves as well.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Samhita Kumar. I've been learning Hindustani classical music for the past 10 years under the guidance of Sri Chitranjan Gupta and Dr. Vinay Bede. Outside of music, I'm currently a junior at the University of Texas at Dallas, majoring in accounting, and I will be graduating this summer.
Hello, everyone. My name is Janani Ramesh, and I'm a vocal Carnatic student of Srimati Charumati Ramachandran. Outside of music, I am involved in various things, one being my nonprofit organization, Care Spaces, which I'm co-founder of, and currently applying for graduate and medical school programs. So I'm very happy to be here and share the stage with Prajan and Samhita.
Wonderful, wonderful. So going back to the topic for today, so as Ramesh Uncle said, we're going to be talking about the parallels between Hindustani and Carnatic music in the context of the raga. And it's the concept of a ragam is very fascinating. And I think as we dive in deeper, we'll start to explore some of these nuances here. But just to kind of set the stage, we often say that music is a universal language. And a lot of that is because of the fact that it's so easy to relate to. You don't necessarily have to understand the words or even the tonalities to really appreciate it. But that being said, different styles of music are influenced by their geography. There's an origin story behind this rich art. So I think it would be great maybe if we get started by maybe a quick history. I know, Samhita, do you want to maybe start with the history of Hindustani classical music, and maybe Janani, we can go to the Carnatic form, and then we can dive right in. We can start to discuss some topics.
Yeah, absolutely. So going into the origins of Hindustani music, it does trace back to the 12th century, where we started to see a little bit of classical music concentrated in North India, and probably a very small village. And it didn't really start to spread until the 14th through 18th century. And during that time, these musicians, they started to, travel and transition from a temple setting to a court setting. And during this time, while interacting with other people, there was some Arabic influence, Persian influence, Mughal influence. So all of that kind of came in and really changed the way Hindustani music was from the beginning. And once again, there was a very famous musician during the 14th century known as Tansen. I'm sure many of you are familiar with him. He was a court musician who really helped popularize Hindustani music, and he also created several rags that we sing today, as well as several compositions. So he made a big impact on this music style. And additionally, as time progressed, more styles in Hindustani music emerged. So originally it had started off with Drupad and Damar, but over time, with all this other influence coming in, they were able to create new kinds of compositions. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about each type of composition for people who may not be as familiar with Hindustani music. So one of the first ones was khayal. It directly translates to thinking, thought. So typically in this kind of composition, it's very few lines, 3 to 4 lines, and the bandish itself is really about showing your technical capability, what you know about the rag. This is where you can show your complex thinking, what you can do technically. Next, another important one would be Tarana. So Tarana was also developed, and I know Tilana came from Tarana. So essentially, it's just the lyrics are meaningless. We use bowls such as Tadiana, Tanaderina, those type of words, and they're meaningless. But the composition itself was created to show people's technical skills and show that they can sing at a fast speed. Another kind of composition, this is where you kind of see the Persian influence, ghazals. Ghazals are typically in Urdu. So that was another great example to kind of see where that influence came in. So that's a few styles, a few composition styles. And during this 14th through 18th century period, with all these musicians spreading across North India, they started settling in different areas, whether it was Jaipur, Punjab, wherever. And over the years, they passed their music on to others. And when you look at it today, you can see that there's different gharanas. So we have Patiala gharana, Agra gharana, Jaipur gharana, Gwalior gharana. There's several. I even know of an Arizona gharana. So there's several of them. And when you look at 2 different gharanas, you can see kind of how it changed over the year, how their perspective of music has changed. For example, maybe in Jaipur gharana, you're allowed to take a phrase in a rag that you can't take in Agra gharana. So it's very interesting to see how they've changed over the years when they all really started from the same place. So that's a little bit about the background. In terms of pronouncing the swars, I know there's a small difference there. We pronounce the scale sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa, ni, da, pa, ma, ga, re, sa. And in terms of language, typically we sing in Hindi. We do have an occasional Punjabi composition. And like I said, with the ghazals, sometimes we have Urdu as well. Janani, do you want to talk a little bit about the Carnatic background, history?
Yeah, definitely. So Carnatic music varies in that it primarily originated in the Carnatic belt of the geographical south of India. And it was influenced by primarily influences around that geographical region rather than from outside influences, such as what we heard from Samhita for Hindustani music. It's influenced by Tamil Pan, which is like the origins of certain rags and used in Devarams and other Tamil scriptures. Samavedam and Hindu mythology are also other influences. It's very hard to pinpoint exactly when Carnatic music started. It was a very evolutionary process through various influences. And like I said, there are not many influences outside of the Carnatic belt. And then later, of course, we know music is always shared, and we continue to share music across the globe. And so we see a lot of composers that bring other styles of music, such as Dikshidhar and other composers who bring elements from and inspiration from Western music and music from North India and all over the world into our concerts, into our songs. So in terms of gharanas, kind of, I guess, an equivalent is banis, or the lineages between gurus and sishyas. So that's the teacher-student sort of passed down, like you have in your families generationally. And we kind of pass down songs like we pass down recipes in families, right? So everyone has their special ingredient that they add to it, but the overall song bank is common to all. And we just have our own flavors, our own ways of embellishment, the ways that we approach a raga. All of those are influenced by primarily your teacher and, of course, the artist that you also listen to as well. And I think a big difference that I've noticed between Hindustani and Carnatic concerts is that Carnatic concerts explore a lot, like the number of ragas we explore within like a 2 hour time frame is a lot more. So our songs are split into like Pallavi, Anupallavi, Charanam, typically if it's like a Kirtanam or a Kriti. And we start the concert usually with a varnam, which kind of takes a ragam and expresses the colors of the ragam, and it has a very specific format. And then we have a main piece that sort of is staple in the concert. It's kind of the center of the concert, and we spend a lot of time on embellishments and improvisations. And then we have tukudas, which are kind of lighter songs and more, popular numbers, things like that. And we see some of the Hindustani ragas show up there in like a ragam tanam pallavi context, or even in a tukuda in terms of bhajans and things like that. And so we bring in other languages that are not common to the Carnatic belt in that part of the concert. And then tilana, like she said, tarana, tilana is very similar to that. We have jatis and swaras that are primarily the composition, and then we have a few lines of sahityam or words. And so primarily the languages that we see used in Carnatic music are Tamil, Kannada, Sanskrit, Telugu. These are the languages. And then, of course, in the Meera bhajans and other bhajans in the Tukuda section of our concert, we explore with Hindi and other languages. And like Samhita said, we pronounce our swaras as sa, ri, ga, ma, pa, da, ni, sa. So we see that both the languages and the way that we pronounce our swaras influence the way that we sing and the way voice is produced. So we'll see a lot of those differences as we continue to talk today, I think. So Prajan, would you like to take it from here?
Yeah, that's great. And actually, Samhita, as you were mentioning the gharanas, different gharanas, I remember when we talked briefly, you had said how you actually have shifted gharanas based on the tutelage that you had. Can you speak to maybe how you made that transition? Was it a little unusual for you to have different styles, different gharanas, and then how you interpreted with the rag? Did that affect you? How was that?
Yeah, so definitely, like I was saying, there is a little bit of a stylistic difference between different gharanas. So I did have a little bit recently. I've had a little influence from Jaipur gharana. So one big difference I did notice, and it was a little hard to adjust to, was kind of the bandish structure. So typically under Patiala gharana, we do improv throughout. We do it in the beginning, we do it in the middle, we do it everywhere. So it was really free for me to do it anywhere. But under Jaipur gharana, we're expected to sing the entire bandish first before we do any improv. And also, it doesn't seem that they emphasize much on sargams and swar. So a lot of the improv is just akar. So that was a big kind of difference I noticed, and it did take me a little time to adjust to that.
Yeah. Now it's interesting you mentioned that, because if we extend the idea of language diction, as a violinist, one of the things we observe is we don't really have the ability to pronounce words with our violin. Now that being said, we do have articulation. So maybe if we think about the idea of how do we play the violin in the context of Hindustani or Carnatic music, what's quite powerful is we are taught from the very beginning that you should essentially reproduce what you hear. So in many ways, even the way you use your bow and the way you play phrases, you're supposed to actually be thinking about the words as you play, even though you're not even producing a swaram. In a way, it's almost everything is akar in a form, but you can actually bifurcate the way you play the instrument and start to produce almost vocal sounding music. So it's very interesting, coming from both the Western and Eastern influences. For example, if I show this form of music to folks who are more traditionally Western, classical, etc., the first reaction they have is, oh my gosh, that sounds like someone singing. And that's almost the immediate reaction they have. And then you're like, that's great, because that was the whole cultural heritage behind instrumental music in the context of this rich art. So thank you so much. Thank you for the origin stories here for both those styles here. But I'm thinking what we should probably address the elephant in the room here, which is what is a rag, or what is a ragam? I mean, I think we're using that word, but what does that mean? And I think it's good to maybe take a step back, look at it a little abstractly, and start with some demonstrations. We'll see how it goes. We just wanted to keep this as an open discussion, so I think we'll just do some demonstrations, evolve. We'll see what ideas Janani and Samhita have today. So let's think about how do we define a ragam or rag. So one way to think about it is essentially a melodic arrangement of tonalities. Okay, and what is the purpose of this melodic arrangement of tonalities? Ultimately, we use them, we use a rag or ragam essentially as a mode of expression. And I think we've seen the different style, different compositions, different composers, different structures that you can express yourself. But ultimately, the ragam itself is it's just a melodic arrangement of tonalities. And we can kind of explore each of these concepts. So what does it mean to be melodic? Um, this starts to introduce the idea of nadam, swaram, that it's not just fixed frequencies of notes, and we can start to demonstrate this here. But really, what it is it's a very complex arrangement of these sounds, and even the way you say a certain swaram, even sa, ri, like they have a very very complex nuance to it. It's not just discrete sounds. So that's the first part. It's melodic. A ragam is melodic. The next is the arrangement. So this gets into the idea of we know traditional linear ragams, for example, like melakartas we think of up and down, but then you can have more complex arrangements like vakra ragams, for example, where there's actually a non-linear pattern, and that actually gets embedded into the life of the rag and ragam. And I think it's one of those fascinating ideas that in many ways I think we've all resonated with this, that a rag or ragam is really something that's almost living. And it's something you collaborate with, and you live within that ethos of that rag and really start to express yourself in composition and in improvisation. So there's the arrangement. And then the next is tonalities. And that's like a very ambiguous word, but really what it gets to is this idea of sound, the complexity in the sound. There's so many microtones, nanotones that are so specific to Hindustani and Carnatic music that makes it so rich. And then I think that transitions nicely into ornamentation, etc. So all of this, the melodicism, the arrangement of the tonalities, all of this we use to express ourselves. So I think before we get into some demonstrations, I think we should talk about this idea of expression, because when we even have, you might have heard, for example, people describe a rag as what time of day, or it has certain emotions associated with it. And in many ways, I think that's very personal. But I also feel that based on the way these rags and ragams were made, there's something to it. There's something that inherently it draws out. So I think maybe, Janani, do you want to maybe speak to what you think of, like expressively, how does a rag or raga speak to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of ragams, like Prajan said, the ornamentation is like a form of communication, right? When we're communicating between the artist on stage, communicating to the audience, if you're accompanying a dance performance, you're also sharing that communication with a dance artist as well. And we see ragas, they're used in healing. Some artists use ragas in healing as well. And navarasas, of course. We have certain ragas associated with certain navarasas. And as we know, like a really common one in terms of the seasonal ragas is Amritavarshini, which we know is we associate with rain, right? There have been times that people have sung Amritavarshini and we've experienced rain, right? So it takes a lot of intention to sing ragas in those expressive ways, and it's mastery of melodic arrangement of tonalities that then turns into that expression. And it's using that ornamentation as like a form of communication. And like Prajan said, I like to think of ragas as like people. Like they're people with personalities, they have a name, they have characteristics, and they have such a deep personality that we can keep exploring over and over again. And so I'm actually curious to hear from Samhita, what is sort of the expressive ragas that you guys have in Hindustani music that you've heard of? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so going off of the one you mentioned with the monsoon and the rain, so we do have a similar rag in Hindustani known as Megh Malhar. And this is also a monsoon rag. Back in the day when Tansen, he was the one who created this rag in Hindustani. When he used to sing it, it would rain, and his delivery of the rag was just so amazing. Anytime he would sing it, it would rain. So it's really amazing to see how certain phrases can really help convey that emotion that you're going for. And I think another concept that we have in Hindustani music, I guess to help better convey the emotion, is we have morning ragas, afternoon ragas, and evening ragas. So if you were to do a concert, we usually try to get the time first so we can kind of plan what we're going to sing. So for example, if I were to be doing a morning concert, an example of a morning rag would be Todi. So I would sing Todi in the morning, and that would really help convey the emotion even more than I already was trying to do. Afternoon raga would be like Brindavani Sarang. An evening rag would be Hamsadwani. So that kind of comes into play as well. I don't know, do you guys have a similar system with morning raga, evening raga?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a little bit more flexible for us. Okay. And yeah, like Prajan said, it's so personal, right? It's really personal to the artist and how they're feeling on a particular day. And certain ragas, different ways that you sing them and different placements that you put them in your concert will give
Right.
you a different experience, right? It's always ragas in context in the concerts, right? What comes before it, what comes after it, how fast are you singing it, how slow are you singing it? All of that really like helps you feel the mood of the ragam, and also which instruments are playing it. Is it the voice, or is it the violin, or is it the flute, right? So all of those things deliver the expression in different ways. So
Oh,
yeah.
that's great.
Prajan, actually, I would want to hear a little bit about, speaking of instruments, would want
Yeah.
to hear a little bit more about like your experience with tonalities on like
Uh-huh.
a violin. So can
Oh,
you like
sure.
show some demonstrations on that?
Yeah, sure, sure. And it's interesting. You talk about this idea. I mean, taking a step back, I only just thought about this that you mentioned when you sing, it can actually affect nature, right? And I think in many ways it makes a lot of sense because if we date back to like the idea of like, for example, Vedic influences, Vedam, all of that, the origin behind that is very sound based. There's no written word.
Yep.
And the idea of why do we even say, for example, Vedam, and what do these sounds mean? They were actually kind of converted from sounds that you heard cosmologically from ancient times. And then the idea is that when you actually produce those sounds, it has an influence on the world. So
Yep.
inherently, this was even before we coined the term like music. It's just the idea that even sound, the way we hear it, and then the way we produce it actually has an effect on the world. So I think it's very fascinating. We can think of something as concrete as rain, but we can even date back to thousands of years before, millennia before, where there already this fundamental concept in our culture around sound influencing the cosmos. So
And even the harmonics, right, that we have, which is like the essence of our shruti, right, is
yep,
derived from like tonalities that are not always heard but are inherent in sound, right?
right,
It's like
right,
distilled sound. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, what's nice is we have this. It's really great to have the three of us here because I think we have an instrument and we have two different forms of singing. So I think we can really start to show a lot of parallels. So what we'll talk about real fast. Why don't we talk about this idea of just tonality? Like what does it mean? What is a ragam? Let's try to see if we can derive one. So the fundamental basis for a ragam, it lives in a scale. I mean, it lives in a set of frequencies. In Hindustani music, we call that the tat, and there are multiple tats. There are 10 of them, and each of them have certain chromatic notes that are built in, and within that you can derive the rag. I would say the similar equivalent in Carnatic music would be something like the Mela Karta. I know there's other systems, but fundamentally from those scales lives that raga ragam. So let's just take an example here. Let's just take a tat, the tat kalyan, and keep in mind this is not a raga ragam. This is just the scale, or the set of frequencies within which we can see where the rag or ragam originates. So that's just a simple scale, and in Western classical we call this the Lydian mode, the Lydian scale, but essentially Kalyan, and we can actually see which, for example, ragam lives in this. So I'll play a ragam. We'll see if folks recognize it here. It's a beautiful ragam here. So that was essentially ascending, descending swaram for Kalyani. So you can immediately see a stark contrast. I mean, we're talking about just a set of frequencies, but then when you think about Kalyani, it's so much complexity, and we're not even playing a composition, right? We're just even trying to represent these tonalities. This the sa, the di, the ga, the ma. So if we just take one of these, let's just take the ma. The ma. You'll notice it's actually living. It's not just a stationary frequency. So it's ma, ma. So it's actually you're oscillating between two frequencies, the pa and the ma. And in fact, in Kalyani in particular, in this example, we're actually dominating more on the pa, the resolved note. So ba ma ba ba ma ba ma ma. And if we do something just for fun, if we just flip that timing. So instead of emphasizing the pa for most of the madhyamam, if we just emphasize more of the madhyamam, what we get instead of ma, you'll get ma. So we haven't even done anything different with the timing. All we've done is we've just changed the emphasis on which frequency we're choosing within that tat. So ma na na is more of the Kalyani ragam feel, and if we do something like it's got more of this reminiscent to, I would say, maybe a Hindustani rag like Yemen. So this is just a brief kind of just exploring this idea and showing a quick demonstration on how the rag and the ragam is actually far more complicated, but it's fundamentally driven on a set of frequencies. But it's really living. It's really living. So maybe we'll start doing some demonstrations here. I'm thinking, just so for the folks at home, one of the interesting things we ran into when we were just talking about how we were going to approach this is we all have different shrutis. Our sajam fundamentally lives on a different shruti. Violin tends to be on E. I believe Janani, I believe you sing around G, and Samhita's at C. So to make sure it's not confusing at all, we've converged on one shruti, which none of us use, but I think it'll serve as a great way for us to demo. And we're going to choose D as our base frequency. So for anybody wants to turn on a tambur at home just to follow along. So we're going to use a D. So I'm wondering, maybe we start with why don't we start with maybe some ragas that we think of as equivalents, maybe? I don't know, Janani, do you have one in mind you want to think about?
I mean, I was basically just thinking about starting with a starting ragam that we would choose in Carnatic music, maybe just to start us off on, we talked about different ragams having different expressions. So I know a common starting ragam that also has an equivalent in Hindustani music is Chakravakam. So we see a lot of starting songs in Carnatic music start with Chakravakam. It's the third Melakarta in the Katapayadi Sankhya Melakarta system, and it's different in a Dikshadhar school, so I'll go into that a little bit. But I do know that it has the same scale as Ahir Bhairav, which we also have in Carnatic music, but I know that derives from Hindustani music. So I think it'll be cool to see the differences in Chakravakam, Ahir Bhairav, and Hindustani music. So maybe I can start with showing the difference between Chakravakam and Ahir Bhairav just in the Carnatic style. And then we can go and, Samhita, maybe you can come in and talk a little bit about Ahir Bhairav in the Hindustani style. So,
yeah, definitely.
Sorry, I'm going to have to do a little bit of switching up here with higher register, lower register. So sorry about that to everyone listening. So this is Chakravakam. Sari ga ma padani sa sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. And then contrasted with Ahir Bhairav in Carnatic music. Sari ga ma padani sa sa ni da pa ma ga ri sa. So I did Magarisa instead of Magarisa. So immediately you see that difference in the way that we approach the Re. This is just in Carnatic music. So a quick flavor of Chakravakam would be Gajanana Yutam Ganeshwaram Bhajami Satatam Sureshwaram. So this is actually a Dikshadhar composition. Dikshadhar is a very famous composer, one of my favorites. And in his school of music, it's the 16th Melakarta and it's called Toya Vegavahini. He likes to name things in his favorite names. So he calls it Toya Vegavahini. And same scale as Chakravakam, but we see that this version of Chakravakam is a little bit faster. We sing it a little bit faster. Gajanana Yutam, like that. And Ahir Bhairav is very different. So like I said, it's Magarisa. We don't really hear that in Chakravakam. Magari. We hear more of that. Padani. We do that oscillation as well. So I want us to pay attention to the oscillations because I think that's very key differences between Hindustani music and Carnatic music. So Samhita, do you want to show us a little bit of Ahir Bhairav in Hindustani music?
Yeah, absolutely. So before I sing the scale, I just want to give a little background about the rag. So basically, Ahir Bhairav is a mix of Bhairav and Kafi. So when we sing the rag, we like to focus the lower side of the scale on Bhairav and the higher end on Kafi. So we somehow incorporate it into one rag, which is really cool. And in terms of focus notes, we really focus there on the re. The re is very important. So when I sing the scale, you can see how I drag the re from the ga, and I emphasize it a lot, especially in alap and in the bandish. So I'll start with the scale. Sari gama padani sa, sa ni da pa ma ga re sa. So you can see there I held the re out a little longer and I pulled it from the ga. So that's very, very important, and I will demonstrate an alap now, and you can kind of see how I keep coming back to the re because I want to emphasize that, that is the focus note. Re na That's a little alap. I'm not able to go as high because of the shruti, but that's a little bit about the rag. And again, you could see that re, that dragging of the re from the ga. So that oscillation continuously between both notes.
So maybe I can do a little bit of alap so we can compare, and then maybe we can like do a little bit of a song potentially.
Sounds good. So that's Ahir Bhairav. I think we've established that Chakravakam was a little bit very different. So we're going to stick to Ahir Bhairav to kind of go back and forth. Samhita, do you want to start with Bandish in Ahir Bhairav, and then I can do maybe a pallavi of a song? Yeah, sounds good. So I was thinking I could do a Vilambit, and we can kind of show that in show a slower composition. Sure. So once again, Vilambit means slow. So I'll be singing a Khayal, Vilambit Khayal. And as I mentioned earlier, Khayal is it's basically sung to show the features of the rag, how all the technical capabilities and all of that. So I'll start with that. And this is in Ektal, which is a 12-beat cycle. Rasiya Mara Re Amalara Rata Mata Ajuji Rasiya Mara So that's just a little bit of the stai. And then from there we would go into Vistar, which is exploration of the rag. Jenny,
I'll try to match that speed, because a lot of times people think Carnatic music is faster, Hindustani music is slower. We actually have both elements in both music, so it's equally hard to do both. So let me try to match that speed with the song in Ahir Bhairav. Shri Jagadishwari Durga Mata, Shri Jagadishwari Durga Mata, Shri Jagadishwari Durga Mata, Shri Jagadishwari Durga Mata, Swagatam Suswagatam Swagatam Suswagatam. So that's just the Pallavi of the song. So you can see where the similarities and differences are. You can definitely tell that it's derived from Hindustani music, the way that we deliver it. And it's very different from the way we deliver Chakravakam, as we said earlier. So actually, I'm curious to see how this sounds on a violin when you remove the words and the diction and our pronunciations from this. So, yeah. Prajan, do you want to?
Oh yeah, sure. Let's take a look at this. So maybe let's stay on the same topic of the re, right? So yeah, I was just listening to the different lines you had. So for example, once again, a recap on the violin. If we were to take Chakravakam, so there's this re essentially, and then I was just listening to what Samhita was singing in terms of the Vilambit here. So I think that contrast is very clear. But then I think where the tricky one is how we actually take the rag and integrate it into Carnatic music. So maybe if we take a look at a little bit of alap and maybe a short, quick line of a bhajan in Ahir Bhairav. It's a Carnatic composition, so maybe we'll start with a little bit of alap here. So. So once again, kind of reiterating this idea, even if we take the diction, the words, even the way we change the pronunciation, what you'll notice, for example, the three re's. I think maybe we'll end on just demonstrating that one more time, and I think we should maybe take a look at some more ragam and rags here because there's so much to explore. So Chakravakam, and then Ahir Bar more from the Carnatic style, and then more of the Hindustani side to it. So it might sound like one of them is faster, one of them is slower, but really, if you time it, they're pretty much the same time we're spending on the notes. It's really just the swaram, I should say. It's just really that the way we emphasize the timing really influences the way we feel, what the authenticity behind it, what the composition merits. So yeah. So maybe we should keep. Do we want to do something else? Let's take a look. I think this is great.
I mean, we can spend hours on every ragam, but we're gonna try to give you guys like a taste of several ragas.
Yeah.
So, Samhita, do you have an idea for maybe the next raga we could talk about? Because I know we talked about a lot when we were like just talking amongst each other.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there's several ragas in both, that have the same scales, and we just think, oh, they're the same scales, they're the same rag. But really, when you start to delve deeper into the rags, as we have been discussing the last few weeks, we've noticed a lot of small differences that, may not be noticeable to the normal eye. So I think Bihag was a great example that we talked about. I think we should definitely try to demonstrate some of those differences we noticed. So we do have the same scales, but the delivery of the scales are slightly different. So I think we should show the scales first before going into anything else. Janani, do you want to start with your scale, the Bihag scale? And Carnatic?
Actually, we'll have you start it because I started last time, so I'll give you a chance to start.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so the scale for Bihag is Ni sa ga ma pa ni sa ni pa ma pa ga ma ga sa. So before Janani sings her scale, I just want to emphasize how I kind of slid from the ni to the pa, and then again from the ga to the sa. So we call that sliding motion when you sing. It's called a meend. So we slide from one note to another. So I'll sing the scale one more time just to show you. Ni sa ga ma pa ni sa ni pa ma pa ga ma ga sa. So in Hindustani Bihag, we actually don't take the re and we don't take the da. So we always slide over it unless we're singing a fast variation. Janani, do you want to sing your scale?
Yeah, absolutely. Sa ga ma pa ni da sa. So immediately you can see we use the da. Sa ga ma pa ni da sa. Sa ni pa ma ga ri sa. We do use the ri as well. Sa ga ma pa ni da sa. Sa ni pa ma ga ri sa. So we both actually, one similarity we had is ga ma ga. We used that sort of embellishment there. So I think what would be cool is maybe we could do this a little bit differently. Rather than doing alapana, maybe we could do like phrases, and I'll try to like copy your phrase. If you can do small phrases, I can try to copy them, and we can really see the differences in the colors maybe.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay.
So, something I was noticing, Janani, I was gonna ask Samhita. I heard we have two Nishadam, right?
Yeah.
So you snuck it in there. We didn't talk about it. I don't think we've told the audience about this, but Samhita, do you have two Nishadam and Behag? Because I noticed.
No, we actually don't. We just take the shuddhani. So that's interesting that you take the komal nishad as well.
As
Yeah,
well.
it's more of a stylistic thing. It's
Okay.
we call it a bhashangaragam in some cases where we sneak in another note for the experience, right? So
Right.
that's why the raga is never just the scale, right? I hope everyone is hearing that in Western music we call it a scale, we don't call it a rag. We don't call it the Lydian rag, right? For a reason, right? Here it's an experience. So that's how we experience it. But I think it's very interesting. And also we have both mas, and you also have in Carnatic music we have both mas. Hindustani music also has both mas, right?
Yes.
So how often do you dwell on that pratimadhyamam or?
So again, this is a Gharana type of thing, and it changes from teacher to teacher.
Okay.
But some teachers like if you emphasize a lot on the Tivrama because it shows that it's really bihag. Some like to just take it once in a while to show that effect of the different mas. So again, it kind of depends on teacher, Gharana. So I've heard both from different teachers. So do you take the mas together? Has that been something that's allowed in?
Yeah, there's actually one song that I know. I mean, I think it's a stylistic thing. They do. Some people may have heard this. It's a GNB popularized Bhartiyar song. So he sings Dik teri yaad kaatil pa ma ma ga. Sorry, I'm not able to choose higher or lower register, but pa ma ma ga. That's not something we do all the time. It's more of like a cool style thing,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. One of my teachers once told me that I could take it. But then I don't know if it's frowned upon by other people because it's kind of a rare phrase. So that's interesting.
And Samhita, you're mentioning the sa to the pa ni to pa ga to sa, but you do the re and the daivatam rishabam. I mean, they're in the rag, right? There are moments when you can.
Yes, they are there. So
yeah.
Really, the times you can take it. When I'm doing the mean, yes, it's there. I just slide over it so it's not heard. But I can't actually pronounce the notes if I'm singing a fast variation such as a tan, or even in my alap. As long as I go over it really quickly, it's okay. It's considered okay.
So can you show us can you show us a phrase of that?
Yeah, sure. So for tan, if I'm coming down, I can take it. So so see, I was able to take it there because I was on it for a split second, so it's okay.
Okay.
So
it's not missing from the Arohanam Avrohanam. It's there, but you're not highlighting it. Okay.
Right. Exactly.
Got it.
Once again, the timing influences how you choose to elaborate.
And actually, speaking of timing, I want to hear this from an instrument.
Oh yeah, sure.
Instruments do tanam, which is very timing based, and it's also very instrumental sort of delivery. So in Carnatic music, we have ragam tanam pallavi, and sometimes instruments do this outside of the ragam tanam pallavi too, where we have tanam, and it's a specific type of like articulation that we do with the voice and the instrument. So can you show us a little bit of that?
Yeah,
maybe?
sure. And when people do just for sequence, I'll do a quick alap, just very fast,
definitely.
just so we can get into it, but obviously not again.
That is so iconic. Thank you.
No, of course. Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because if we it's the same. I was thinking it's the same thing as what Samhita was mentioning. We're based on the timing.
Yes.
Even the way we take the swaram, in some extent, even in Carnatic music, we do change the way we emphasize swaram. So I think it's very, very fascinating, this idea that you can actually choose what swaram to emphasize based on the speed of what you're playing and the timing. I think timing is everything.
Right.
Samhita, is there anything else where timing plays a role in how a rag is used, for example?
Or certain like swara choices, maybe even like, you know how you were saying in certain speeds you're using the da.
Right.
Is there a different situation where, you know, you're emphasizing on certain swarams and, you know, there are differences in the way that you emphasize and what's being communicated?
Yeah, I think that actually brings up the concept of vadi and samvadi. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. So vadi is the most prominent note in a rag, and then samvadi is the second most prominent note in a rag. So you kind of shift between the two to show the colors of the rag. And I think a great example actually would be Bhupali. You guys were saying that the notes determine, you know. So looking at Bhupali, the vadi and samvadi are ga and da. But it's really interesting. There's actually another rag that uses the exact same notes as Bhupali. It's called Deshkar. But the vadi and samvadi are actually switched. So the vadi is da and the samvadi is ga. So it's the opposite. So the rags are the same. Everything is the same. The only difference is the vadi and samvadi are switched. So you can imagine how hard it can be to, you know, present one of the two, because you have to make sure, you know, you aren't emphasizing too much on ga or not emphasizing too much on da. So that's actually really interesting that you brought that up. That's a great example.
So Bhupali, if I'm not wrong, I think we always correlate that with Mohanam.
Yeah.
Carnatic music, but I have never heard of Deshkar being correlated to Mohanam. So until, you know, we were talking the other day, so I actually like learned a little bit more about it, and I want to hear from you as to like what those two colors are of Bhupali and Deshkar. Right. And I believe Mohanam is sort of a combination of both. It's like an experience that is both Bhupali and Deshkar. So maybe we can go into that a little bit. I think that's very unique.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think maybe I can sing some alap in Bhupali and Deshkar to kind of show how I'm emphasizing on different notes.
And you want to start with the Arohanam Avarohanam first?
Yes.
It's the same Arohanam for us as well.
Yeah, sorry, it's too loud. So the Bhupali scale. Sa re ga pa da sa, sa da pa ga re sa. And then Deshkar scale, the exact same. Sa re ga pa da sa, sa da pa ga re sa. So there's absolutely no difference.
And the Mohanam scale. Sa re ga pa da sa, sa da pa ga re sa. So yeah, for all the students out there, I mean, it's like one of the first ragams that we learned, but it's so rich. So really excited to explore this.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So some Bhupali alap, I'll sing a little bit. So you can kind of listen to how I'm focusing around the ga first before the da. So that would be Bhupali. You can see I keep coming back to the ga to, you know, show this is Bhupali, this is not Deshkar. And another, I guess, big difference I forgot to mention. So Bhupali is considered a Purvang Pradhan rag. So that means that we focus more on the lower side of the rag instead of the higher end, which makes sense because ga is towards the bottom. And then Deshkar is Uttarang Pradhan Rag. So again, we focus on the higher side and thus towards the higher end. So that makes sense as well.
So before you do Deshkar, actually, I think it'd be cool if could I show a little bit of Mohanam on the lower side?
Absolutely.
So we have very famous songs that start with that lower half of the ragam, and you all must have heard this song, very famous Tyagaraja composition. Nannu palimpa nadachivachidivo Nannu palimpa nadachivachidivo. We're around that Gaparisa Nannu pa. And then another famous song is Gapali Gaparisa. So that's more Bhupali flavors, I think. So now I think if we can go to Deshkar, we'll really see the difference.
Yeah, so I'll sing a little bit of Deshkar. So immediately off the bat, I'm starting up at the. So Sari ga pa da da pa da ga pa da da pa ga ri ga ga pa da ga pa sa da pa ga ri ga sa ri ga pa da. So you can kind of see I keep going back to the da there.
So when you did that da, actually, can you do those da oscillations one more time? That actually reminded me of a song that I know. So showing how Mohanam is both Deshkar and Bhupali. I just showed you Mohanam as more of Bhupali heavy. Now Deshkar, with that exact same phrase, there's a Dikshidhar composition called Pahi Mam Parvati, and the Anupallavi starts with that exact da phrase that she just did. And the word Mohanam is used there. So Dikshidhar does this very special thing where he brings the name of the ragam into the song, right? And so he chose to put the word Mohanam on that phrase because I guess he felt that's iconic of Mohanam, which is very interesting because it's very iconic of Deshkar, right? So for audiences, Mohanam is not just equal to Bhupali. I actually think it's also part of Deshkar as well. So she just sang da da ga da. So Mohana Sundara Swarupini Shankari Mohana da da Mohana. Exact same phrase that she just sang in Deshkar. So I'd actually like to hear, before I go into that, maybe you want to do a little bit more of embellishments and things in Bhupali or Deshkar, your choice. Samhita?
Yeah, sure. Would be Bhupali.
Can you sing just like one line of a song that you know?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll be singing a Madhyale Bandish in Adda Tintal. So Adda Tintal is a combination of Tintal and Bhajani Teka. It's a 16-beat cycle, but it has incorporated some elements from Bhajani Teka, which is an 8-beat cycle. So this would be similar to a Vilambit, I would say, but it's just not as slow. तुम संग लागली जब से तुम संग लागली जब से तुम संग लागली प्रीत नवेलरी प्यारे बलमा मोरा जब से तुम संग लागली जब से तुम संग लागली जब से तुम संग लागली. So I want to explain what I just did. So essentially I was doing variations on the lines, so just changing the first line, and it sounds really nice when you kind of change a word from the original phrase it was on. So now I'll just do a little bit of Vistar. So this is kind of the point where you start to explore the rag, the lower, middle, and higher end. जब से तुम संग जब से तुम संग जब से तुम संग जब से तुम संग So I'll just do a little bit for now. I'm not going to go into full detail, but typically that would last for 15-20 minutes almost, because you really explore each note and all the possible variations around that. Janani, do you want to sing any composition?
Yeah, I'll just go into that one line that I alluded to earlier.
Yeah.
And just explain. I just had some ideas as to how we could do that. So, like I said, the word Mohanam comes into that line. So it's a beautiful line to do Neraval, which is the same as Vistar, like where you take one line and elaborate on that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was saying, usually we sing the As, which is the original line, and then we kind of go into it beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
So this is in Rupaka Talam, which is 12-beat cycle. Mohana Sundara Swarupini Shankari Mohana Sundara Swarupini Shankari Mohana Sundara Swarupini Shankari Mohana. So we have the word Mohana. So maybe since it's centered around Da, I want to show a little bit more of the Da phrases, because in our Bani, that Da is, I've heard my guru use that a lot in many different ways. So we can use it like Pada Paga Sadaga Pada Da Pada Pada Sada 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 Da Da Ga Pada. We can use it so many different ways. We can take it flat, Da 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 Da, kind of like what she showed. So if we do all of those phrases in that word Mohanam, we can try and see how that'll be. So Mohana, 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 Sundara Swarupini Shankari. So we can take that and really show all the flavors of Mohanam within that line. So I'll put that into a Naraval context and just demonstrate that for a second. Mohana Sundara Swarupini Shankari, Mohana Sundara Swarupini Shankari, Mohana, 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 Sundara Swarupini Shankari, Mohana Sundara Swarupini Shankari, Mohana Sundara Swarupini Shankari, Mohana. So after that, we can go into swaras and elaborate on swaras. So I hope that gave everyone like a flavor of how we would sing Mohanam closer to da, around the da phrases. So it's one of my favorite songs. So yeah, Prajan.
It's interesting. Yeah, I know. I'm like listening to both of you going back and forth. And one of the things I always think about now is, I love listening to Jugalbandis. And one of the questions now I have is, what do we do in a scenario like this? Because so often people say Bhupali, Mohanam, and I always wonder, did the two artists like make a pact with each other where whoever's singing Mohanam's like, listen, I'm not gonna go to da too much. I'm not gonna put you in a tight spot. Or, I don't even know what they do. Do you have any experience with that? I don't even know what they do in that.
I wish I knew. I haven't actually seen a Jugalbandi with Bhupali.
Maybe that's why they haven't done that yet. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of like Jugalbandi artists, composers, I'm wondering, I think maybe we transition in this last segment and talk about maybe sources of influence we've had.
Yeah,
because I think
definitely.
We've really explored different types of ragams, etc., how they're used, but I think there's so much history behind it. So maybe speaking from the violin side of things, I think there's so many great violinists, but one who has influenced me personally tremendously is M.S. Gopalakrishnan. I think he's probably one of the best violinists to bring up in this conversation. And the reason for that is he was rigorously trained in both Carnatic and Hindustani forms of music. And he learned those both independently. And he often says, and for example, in interviews, he would talk about this idea of how he would be challenged. He would have to swap between both styles, like in like minutes. That's how he was trained. And he was not supposed to kind of mingle the two in that context. But eventually, as he matured as an artist and really started to perform a lot, what he developed was his own style of playing. And this is known as the Purur style of playing. It's the Purur Bani. And this style of music is actually something he reserved for when he played solo concerts. And he integrated all sorts of aspects, Carnatic, Hindustani, Western, and he created this own patented style of playing. And I think it's very, very unique. And the reason I bring it up is what he would then do is take the concept of a rag, and he would actually integrate it and play it in his own style. So it'll sound like nothing we've ever heard. It won't sound Carnatic Hindustani at all. So an example of this would be a very famous ragam he plays is Naliniganti. And this is one
truly patented that, I think.
I think he has. I think he did. Yeah, I think both from the ragam, from the swaram perspective. So he actually, the ragam, he plays it, and I don't believe there's a Hindustani equivalent to this ragam. I'll just sing the scale, Samhita. Maybe you can confirm for me. Is there anything that rings a bell for you there?
As far as I know, no.
Okay.
I have not heard.
This is perfect. what we'll do is maybe I'll try in my best effort to play this sort of style of music. And before doing that, maybe Janani, do you think you could just do maybe a quick few seconds of alap and aliniganti, just so that folks hear what traditionally we hear in Carnatic music, and then I'll do some alap as well, followed by a little bit of swaram, which I think will be a bit different than what we're used to listening to.
Sure, definitely.
Great, wonderful. That was great. Let me see if so he takes the idea of timing, notes. There's so much. It's pretty amazing how he's done this. But let's see here. So a little bit of all up there. So you'll notice the timing, the feeling. I don't know, Samhita, based on listening to this, I don't know if it reminisces, feels almost like it's a little bit Hindustani. I don't even know what to characterize it as, but I think some of the timing you'll notice is a little bit different. It's not what we're used to in Nalini Ganti. So maybe a little bit of swaram too. So if we think about swaram on the violin, of course, we're not saying the note names. There's a little bit of diction in how we play the bow, but something you might hear in swaram for traditional. So you just play with the timing, etc. But what he actually does is the way he plays swaram, he actually makes like a little bit of a folk composition out of it. So something like this. So he kind of ends it. There's a little bit of a flair to it. And it's interesting when we think about the techniques he uses. I mean, we can't really vocalize a lot of this. I mean, let alone the double strings. I mean, he starts doing sa 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 di ga 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 di di mama. There's all this sort of unusual tongue twisters to it, and somehow on the instrument it sounds reasonable. You listen to it, you're like, yeah, this is right. This is Naliniganti. But at the same time, going back to the original premise of how the instrument is actually imitating the human voice, I think it's one of those takeaways that there's so much liberty in music. And I think we'll transition into maybe some takeaways in the next few minutes here. But I think one of the I hope we've conveyed is that, yeah, we talk about scale, notes, framework, what you can do, what different gharanas do, what we're used to. But at the end of the day, these rules, as one of my Western violinist teacher would say, rules set you free. It's really just a guidance for you to understand what is that rag, as Janani was saying. It's like a person, and it has a personality, but there's so many ways to explore that personality. So I think it's a really, really rich topic. So I wonder, maybe moving forward, I know we're way past the hour here. Do we want to maybe wrap up with maybe a Tilana, Dharana, something like that, and then we'll just move to takeaways?
Yeah.
And
Sure, yeah, absolutely.
for today.
We'll just do one line of a Tilana and Tarana back and forth. I think, what rag would you like to do, Samhita?
Do you know one in Kamaj, possibly?
Yeah, I can do one in Kamaj.
Great, awesome. So I'll do my sty, and then you can do your sty, and then
Sure.
kind of switch off. Okay, you want to sing yours?
Tam tam udani tom tananam tadaradim nadrida tom tanana tam tam ta udani tom tananam tadaradim nadrida tom tanana tam 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 udani tom tananam tadaradim nadrida tom tanana tam 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 udani tom tananam tanaradim nadrida tom tadaratam tadaradim nadrida tom tadaratam tadaradim nadradatum tadarada.
Wonderful. Okay, so yeah, I think we're at the end of the hour here, and I just want to thank everybody again for tuning in, listening to this conversation.
Before you close
yeah,
up, Prajan, actually, I think it'd be good to just share a little bit about how we kind of came together these past few weeks.
Let's do that. Yeah,
It's
sure.
been such a great experience working
Sure.
with all of you. So yeah, I mean, for me personally, I think I've learned so much about being a better rasika, and I think for me that's been the biggest takeaway. Of course, we're talking about ragas here, but we're all students of Carnatic and Hindustani music, and I think and other music styles as well. And I think being a good listener of both styles is very, very important. And listening to a lot of different types of music. For me personally, like I know I learned a lot from just hearing you guys speak about things, hearing Samhita speak more about Hindustani music, and coming in contact with the ways that Hindustani music explores those ragams. And as a rasika, I think I can do better and listen to more Hindustani music. And I think there's a lot of value add, even if I don't bring it into my style, like maybe GNB sir did when he was composing, or MSG did, and so many artists we see, Dikshadhar as a composer, so many artists have really brought both styles together. I think that takes a different level of mastery. But I think for me as a rasika, I think I can definitely listen to both and learn to enjoy both. So that's been my biggest takeaway, aside from the fact that yes, ragas are the basis of both systems. And I think there are different personalities in both music styles, which I think can be celebrated. So for me, that was my big takeaway from talking to you guys the past few weeks. Do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, so I think for me, I think as musicians, we tend to limit ourselves to whatever we're learning, and we don't try to think outside the box and see what else is out there. But the truth is, when we try to learn and listen to other music, we become better musicians ourselves. So I think being in discussion the last 3 weeks, we've learned a lot about both styles that I probably would have never learned if it hadn't been for this. So I think overall, I've become a better musician just getting to learn about the other styles out there. And I think something that's still just so intriguing to me is that, two that completely different styles of music can have the same notes, same scale, but they're just still so different. And the way they're delivered it's just so different. And that's just really amazing. So yeah, I think overall for me is just becoming a better musician by listening to more music and not just sticking to one thing and limiting myself.
I know, it's been so amazing to hear you guys share music. I mean, I think one big thing from this conversation is that we've just shared music amongst ourselves and hopefully with the audience. I know there are a lot of experts that are musicologists that can talk about this topic in more like theoretical detail, but how we approached it is just as students and as music lovers, we just shared music hopefully with the audience and ourselves. So Prajan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree. I think it's been, it's interesting. I think I was talking to both of you about this. Music, it's so ephemeral in some ways. You produce a sound and you can never really capture that moment in time again. But what it does do is when you sing, when you play, it creates emotion, it creates memories, and some of these memories, I mean, we remember them from a very long time. And I remember one of my orchestral conductors once said, he said, the feelings you have when you're expressing, or whether you're a listener, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a student, whether it's that very first concert you saw, whether it's that student that you see kind of performing, debuting, and sort of blossoming, whatever context you're in, those memories are something nobody can ever take from you. Even the music could be ephemeral, but that's something that kind of lives with you forever. So I think it's really amazing that we've been given the gift of sound. I mean, I don't even think I can even internalize why or how just hearing sound makes us feel so many complex emotions. And I think
that's why we've like kept it with us for so many years, right? There are many students that, even though they don't pursue Carnatic music or Hindustani music or any style of music professionally, we're not pursuing it professionally either, but we take it seriously because it's given us so much back.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the memories I had with you guys when we were sharing music. So definitely. So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. It's remarkable. Yeah, music it's fabulous. But yeah, maybe we kind of just sum up what we have here. I think we're pretty good to go here. But before we just talk about just real quick recap, just so everybody's clear. I just wanted to thank my gurus. I know you guys already led with this, but feel free to do so as well. Without gurus, we are nothing. We just literally can't play, sing, anything. Exactly. So I just wanted to thank my Carnatic violin teachers, T.S. Krishnamurthy and Satya Krishnan, and my Hindustani vocal teacher, Shanta Misra, and of course my Western teachers as well, who've influenced me deeply. And I wanted to also thank the IFAA for this opportunity. I think it's been so compelling working with you both. I agree. I would have never met you both or interacted with you or learned about the simple fact that you can change the way you just emphasize swaram and it becomes a different rag. Like that just like blew my mind. I still cannot, it's amazing. So do you have anything else you want to add, both of you?
Yeah, thank you IFAA for giving us this opportunity. And of course, always many, many thanks and immense gratitude to my gurus as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Same goes for me. Thank you so much to my gurus, and thank you to IFAA for this opportunity. It's really amazing to meet, other musicians and, get to discuss with them like this. So thank you for the opportunity.
And last but not least, audience, of course. Thank you.
Yes, thank you all.
Yes, thank you for tuning in.
Thank you, all of you, Prajan, Janani, and Samhita. It's a great journey listening to you, through the day here, and I feel very bad in actually coming back and interrupting this. I felt like I'm interrupting it. I know it's this topic is very close to many of the audience as well as myself, and I should say first by beginning to say that thank you all for joining this virtual vibes brought to you by Indian Fine Arts Academy of DFW. And 2020 has changed how we can all reinvent ourselves as artists and rasikas. This is one of the finest examples. Three of the young and talented Indian classical musicians engaged us with their depth of their music knowledge and passion to learn a lot more while discussing a subject that is very close to many of our hearts as for themselves. Let me tell you, don't go by their humility during this session. They have a sound foundation in classical music, which gave them the depth of the knowledge. Indian classical music has no limits of learning, and today is a small microcosm of what else can be discussed with the limited time. Of course, this discussion can go on for hours and hours together, and it can also be very engaging. Also, you saw today the musicians challenge themselves by choosing a common pitch that is so much out of their comfort zones. I can see how difficult it is. I'm sure many of the listeners and watchers today would have realized that. Probably for the violin it might be easier, but for the singers it's a lot more challenging to come to the pitch that you chose. As Janani announced or confessed to me earlier, I personally am looking forward to their collaborative music production very soon. And this is an opportunity to, there's a platform that brought you together and sharing your passion with all of us. And we want to hear more of you as performers. I'm obviously, I know you're pretty humble, and you said that you're just students and not really professional performers, but you have a dual career here. So both as pursuing your music as a performer as well as your other careers. So I really look forward to a lot more great things from you guys. Virtual Vibes features some of the performing artists and those who are trained outside India, an opportunity for many of us learn how they understand and imbibe the arts. We have these wonderful performing artists who gave us insights on how they interpret their learning of the arts. This is not a platform to just perform, but a platform to interact with each other like how they did and share us their knowledge. So this is an opportunity for many of the teachers to see how they can approach teaching Indian classical arts for the students outside India. It's also a learning experience for parents. There's a notion of learning in our classical arts if they can provide the right environment for these students, for these kind of students, and for their own kids. And we would love to see more such musicians show their passion and inspire many more to pursue this passion. We're getting a lot of requests from many of our IFA followers to take part in virtual vibes. We're excited to bring our next virtual live session next month. Please stay tuned to our announcements with another set of brilliant artists. Our next event is Yuva Pratibha, featuring the young talented performers from over 14 music and dance institutes of the DFW area on February 27th and 28th weekend, as well as the following weekend in March 6th and 7th. On behalf of the Indian Fine Arts Academy, I would like to wish all our patrons and ardent supporters a happy, safe, and 1 month till we see you again, or 1 week till we see you again. Please stay tuned to all our activities, like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and become members of our vast classical music and dance community. Thank you all for tuning in today, and look forward to all your support for Indian Fine Arts Academy and all our future events. Please do sign up for a membership in our organization, as we are bringing more exciting events in future. Thank you, and thank you.